A good day to everyone, wherever you are. Thank you for taking the time to join us in today's webinar. But before we begin, let me invite you to accomplish a pre-event survey form for this webinar. The link will be flashed on your screen, and the link has also been sent on the chat box. So please take time to accomplish the survey form before we begin, and we'll see you again in a few minutes.
Hello, welcome friends and colleagues to this webinar titled Assessing the Promise of Low Earth Orbit or LEO Satellites in Accelerating Rural Connectivity and Closing the Digital Divide. I'm Vic Guzmin of the Space Business Development Division of the Philippine Space Agency. This webinar is being organized by the Philippine Space Agency, the United States Agency for International Development's Better Access and Connectivity or USAID Beacon activity, and the Asian Development Bank. And now, on this most promising and unforgettable day, I'd like all of you to meet the Chief of Party of USAID's Beacon to give us a brief webinar introduction. He's an economist, policy advisor, and project manager with 20 years of experience in economic development issues in the public sector at the state, federal, and international levels, and in the private sector. His focus is on digital inclusion programs, universal access policy, and last mile connectivity deployments to foster effective universal internet adoption for inclusive growth and poverty alleviation. Please help me welcome Mr. John Garrity.
Great, thank you very much, Vic, for the kind introduction. And magandang umaga po sa iyong lahat, to all of our speakers and audience participants today. We are very excited about the forum that we have assembled with our partners, the US government at the US Embassy Manila and USAID Philippines, the Philippine Space Agency, and the Asian Development Bank. And we'll hear remarks and presentations from the Department of Information and Communications Technology, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as directly from low Earth orbit satellite providers, such as Amazon's Project Kuiper, OneWeb, SpaceX Starlink, and AST SpaceMobile. Thank you also to the audience for your attendance and participation in this event. There is much interest in low Earth orbit satellites in the Philippines, as evidenced by the over 780 people who have registered for this event. 59% of them, of whom are from the public sector, 40% overall are women, and we have significant attendance from our colleagues at DICT, BSP, IEP, PhilSA, and NEDA. So what we're keen to get out of the forum today is a heightened understanding of what exactly is low Earth orbit or LEO satellite connectivity. How is it different from other satellite broadband technologies and services? And what else might be needed to be done in order to introduce and trial LEO service in the Philippines in order to address existing and persistent digital divides across the islands and income groups of the Philippines? As we'll hear from our speakers and panelists, there is potential for LEO broadband internet, as well as lingering challenges, as we are in the early days of technological development and commercial deployment. So this dialogue is meant to give us ideas and light up potential paths that we can explore collectively as we work on expanding the opportunities afforded by digital connectivity for all Filipinos. So maraming salamat po for joining us today, and now let's hear from our speakers. To start, it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Heather Variava, Chargé d'Affaires ad interim at the US Embassy in the Philippines. Heather Variava has been the Chargé d'Affaires ad interim at the US Embassy in Manila, Philippines since September 2021. She is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service class of Minister Council. Previously, Ms. Variava served as the Chargé d'Affaires ad interim and Deputy Chief of Mission at the US Mission to Indonesia. And she was also previously US Consul General in Surabaya, Indonesia, as well as the Director of the Office of Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Maldives, and Bhutan in the Bureau of South and Central Affairs at the US Department of State. A member of the US Foreign Service since 1996, Ms. Variava has worked overseas in several countries, and in Washington, she also served at the State Department Operations Center and on the Thailand desk. Chargé d'Affaires Variava, over to you.
Thank you so much, John. And it's really a pleasure to be here with you all this morning. I'd like to recognize colleagues, Acting Secretary Emmanuel Ray Canitig from the Department of Information and Communications Technology, Director General Joel Joseph Marciano from the Philippine Space Agency, Director Ellen Joyce Sufiencia, Director Communications, Strategic Communications and Advocacy at the Bangko Sentral of Filipinas, George Barcelon, President of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Thomas Abel, Chief of Digital Technology for Development at the Asian Development Bank, and our wonderful panel of experts from Amazon, from AST SpaceMobile, from OneWeb, from SpaceX. It's really great to be with you here this morning to talk about this really important topic of low Earth orbit satellites and accelerating the rural connectivity. I'm really glad to be here. I think this is a really important topic, especially now more than ever, given the challenges we face around the world and particularly in Philippines. Thank you to the Department of Information and Communications and Technology, the Philippine Space Agency, and the Asian Development Bank for co-organizing this event with the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. I also really would like to thank our partners and speakers for taking the time to join us and for contributing. We can improve internet connectivity and digital infrastructure for all Filipinos. The internet offers important opportunities for business, education, and civic participation. But for many Filipinos in remote communities, a lack of reliable internet access means that those opportunities remain out of reach. The damage caused by Typhoon Odette in December also reminds us of the value of a resilient and diversified internet infrastructure during natural disasters. When communities are in their greatest moments of need, internet communication is vital for speeding up humanitarian aid and disaster response. And as a diplomat, I've served for about 20 years and have worked in responses to many national disasters around Asia. And it was very interesting to me this year to see how USAID, as one of the leading contributors to disaster relief after Typhoon Odette, some of that funding went towards ensuring ensuring the internet access got back up and running, bringing communications equipment into the disaster affected area so that we could have those vital communications links. So it's not just food, water, shelter that we need at times of disaster anymore. It's the internet connection. So I think that's yet another reason why today's conversation is so important. While low Earth orbit broadband networks are not yet available in the Philippines, there are promising steps towards realizing their potential. We look forward to the Philippine Space Agency's planned satellite internet test deployments, and we welcome Executive Order 127, which now allows direct access to all satellite systems, whether fixed or mobile, international or domestic, to improve internet access and connectivity. Through the Better Access and Connectivity activity Beacon, USAID is supporting the Philippine government's efforts to develop satellite connectivity that promotes inclusive growth, fosters resilient and democratic communities, and empowers Filipinos all across the country. We believe this technology will drive economic empowerment, innovation, and financial inclusion. I look forward to learning more about the potential of LEO satellites as a viable solution to address the digital divide in the Philippines. As your enduring friend, partner, and ally, the United States is committed to supporting the Philippines' efforts to expand reliable and affordable internet access to help achieve our shared goal of broad-based sustainable growth for all Filipinos. Thank you again for joining us today, and I look forward to a fruitful discussion.
Thank you so much, Charge d'Affaires Heather Variava. May I please request for you to keep your video on for a photo opportunity. And I'd also like to invite our friends from the US Embassy, the organizers from the Philippine Space Agency, as well as from the USAID's Beacon activity and the ADB to also turn your video on for this photo opportunity. And I'd also like to extend that invitation to our resource speakers who are here with us for this morning's webinar. Okay, so please kindly turn your video on for this very quick photo opportunity. And please remember to smile.
Okay, so I'll take the picture, guys. Okay, Bala, can you please turn on your camera? And also is everyone's camera turned on? Okay. All right. Okay, I'll just count to 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's 1. Another shot, please. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Melissa. Thank you once again, Charge d'Affaires Heather Variava. All right, so I'll now be introducing our next speaker, but before I do that, I would like to encourage all our participants and audience attending this webinar to please feel free to type in questions you may have for our resource speakers this morning in our Q&A box. You would find the box at the bottom of this virtual meeting room. All right, so I'll now proceed to introducing our next speaker. He is from the Philippine Space Agency. He has over 25 years of experience leading and managing research and development and technical operations in specialized areas of wireless communications, radio frequency, spectrum management and policy, radio frequency spectrum management and policy, rural connectivity, emergency response communications, sensor networks, and scientific Earth observation microsatellites. Now, before PhilSA, he served as the director of the Advanced Science and Technology Institute of the Department of Science and Technology. So without further ado, it's my honor to introduce to you the Director General of the Philippine Space Agency, Dr. Joel Joseph Marciano Jr. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Tricia. Good morning, everybody. First of all, let me greet Her Excellency Heather Variaba, Chargé d'Affaires of the U.S. Embassy in the Philippines, colleagues from ADB, DICT, NTC, Bangko Sentral, the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, co-organizers from PhilSA, private sector representatives, members of the audience, and including members of the media. Thank you so much for attending this morning. Pleasure to be here. Now, let me share my screen so I can start my presentation. So I hope that's working. Right. So I'm here to talk about Incentivize, introducing non-geostationary satellite constellations, test deployments to improve internet services. So we had to be very creative with this acronym, but we managed to pick out the letters and come up with the word Incentivize here. So again, I'm from the Philippine Space Agency. First, let me give some background and a backdrop, perhaps. The enactment of the Philippine Space Act in August 2019 established the Philippine Space Agency, or PhilSA, as the central government agency addressing all national issues and activities related to space science and technology applications, and that's what we call SSTA. We are the primary policy planning, coordinating, implementing an administrative entity of government for the National Space Program. Now, we're under the Office of the President, and we do have an advisory board composed of the Philippine Space Council, which consists of members of different departments, cabinet members, and as well as the representatives from the Senate and the House, and it is chaired by the President. Now, among the key relevant key development areas for SSTA development are space research and development for spurring rapid scientific growth in vital areas of space and space industry capacity building. This entails accelerating the transfer and diffusion of space technologies and know-how throughout Philippine society towards developing a vibrant local space industry and economy. So in this regard, PhilSA is also mandated to develop, acquire, construct, manage, maintain, and operate space R&D and operation facilities and systems on behalf of the government for use by various stakeholders. This is the current landscape within where PhilSA and our country's young venture into space finds itself. In 2019, the size of the global space economy was estimated to be worth almost $400 billion, comprised of upstream, downstream, and the end users. The upstream sector deals with building satellite components, subsystems, integrating them, putting them together, and testing them. Also for certain ground systems equipment, launch vehicles, that means rockets, spaceports, and services. The downstream sector, on the other hand, which accounts for a bulk of this space economy, deals with the application verticals such as Earth observation, navigation, global positioning, and of course, telecommunications. Now, many sectors such as agriculture, marine, energy and utilities, telecoms, transport, defense, and security take advantage of space data and services in the downstream, accounting for a large chunk. So everyday utilities from global navigation systems that enable transportation, delivery apps, to maps and satellite images, satellite TV and internet rely on satellites orbiting in space. And valuable research has gone into sending astronauts to space have enabled technologies that have come to everyday widespread use. So we might think of space as a faraway notion, but all of us really are living in the space economy. Now, the dawn of mega constellations and increase in frequency of rocket launches are significant components of upstream space activity. According to Bryce reports, 40% of small satellites launched in the last 10 years were launched in 2020. That's in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the same year, the biggest application for these small sats is telecommunications, eating up 83% of the pie. And I think we know who's responsible for this. They're here with us this morning. Now, internet connectivity through satellites is an important space science and technology application, and which is a downstream utilization. So the Philippines, through PhilSA, is not here not just for the ride, nor to be a spectator, but hopefully to contribute to this exciting space journey. Now, having said that, the Philippines, through prior efforts of the DOST, has put in place various components of upstream and downstream space, which the PhilSA is now carrying forward. 6 Philippine small satellites, Diwata 1, Diwata 2, the Maya nano satellites 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are complemented by ground receiving stations, a high-performance computing facility operated by DOST, ASTI, data archiving and distribution facilities. Some of these are being in the process of being transitioned into the PhilSA. So these components and capabilities represent important parts of a space value chain, and they equip the Philippines with a capacity to create and add value from space. Value creation from space is integral to the mission of the Philippine Space Agency. And so now, with internet access as an important downstream of SSTA, PhilSA intends to contribute to these efforts by shining the spotlight on space technologies. We should note that the DICT also enables the conduct of ICT proofs of concept and pilots through Department Circular number 14. And this is a point of synergy between PhilSA, DICT, and other government agencies. The entry of NGSOs, non-geosynchronous orbit satellites, offer further connectivity options that support Executive Order 127 and could mean working with new and with more diverse local ISPs and value-added service providers. Now, at the same time, the space agency's eyes are set at developing the local space industry and an SSTA ecosystem. So engaging closely with these satellite internet companies can open doors for industry capacity building and development. Companies can participate and compete for supply chain opportunities. We have been working closely with the Department of Trade and Industry and the Board of Investments and other agencies in this regard, specifically on inputs on the Strategic Investment Priorities Plan. Now on to incentivize. Because of these exciting developments, we thought we'd help push things a bit further along. PhilSA published an open call through the Incentivize project. Essentially, it's to bring new space tech over to the Philippines so we can demonstrate, test, measure, assess the value proposition delivered by these products and services were validated in other countries, not yet here in the Philippines, which is far different geographically and environmentally speaking. Now, in the downstream, this can provide new options to groups that are now enabled by Executive Order 127. In the upstream, this engagement can open doors to local space-adjacent companies. Now, this project also has R&D objectives as part of the validation of new technologies in the local setting. As mentioned, engaging these satellite operators also draws attention to current relevant telecommunications regulations and perhaps their responsiveness. Could support need to update current policies or accelerate proposed regulatory reforms. Now, as an update on Incentivize, a couple of groups have sent letters of intent, and we're targeting to start the test deployments and the associated R&D activities in early second quarter this year. What are these NGSO satellites anyway? This table shows a comparison of these NGOs denoted by the columns marked LEO and MEO, low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, against some perhaps more traditional geostationary orbit satellites. Now, the closer proximity to Earth entails a shorter return trip time of the signal, therefore lower latency or perhaps more commonly referred to as delay, that's significantly less. And it can support delay-sensitive applications such as video conferencing, interactive gaming, and other rich content. Moreover, because of their shorter lifetime, okay, these satellites need to be perhaps replaced or replenished more often, opening opportunities to be part of a perhaps more active supply chain. Now, given these advantages, there's also the idea of cooperation between LEO and MEO and GEO in a so-called multi-orbit approach that leverages the benefits or strengths of both. We should keep tabs on that. And so enter into this picture Executive Order 127, which aims to lower barriers to accessing satellites in the Philippines for internet. I think it is in fact very timely for it to enter right now. So we can track these satellites using publicly available data on their orbital parameters, so-called TLEs or two-line elements. This supports the objective of certain space conventions, such as the UN Convention on Registration of Objects Launched into Outer Space and the Liability Convention, among others. So one example of an NGSO satellite internet operator is Starlink, SpaceX. You can see here the red circle denoting where the Philippines is, and LEO satellites moving around the globe in low Earth orbit between approximately 400 to 600 kilometers above the Earth. So they are passing over us as we speak. From the perspective on the ground, this animation illustrates how this BEO system is supposed to work from the point of view of a ground terminal. Satellites passing overhead in LEO are only visible in a fixed or given area for a few minutes. So unlike geostationary satellites, NGSO satellites are not fixed from the point of view of the ground terminal. Therefore, in order to communicate effectively with them, the antenna terminal needs to be able to track them by dynamically forming and steering a beam to the satellite. So this can be done mechanically, also electronically using phased arrays. Now the connection is established with the satellite as it passes overhead. The antenna is tracking it. Now for the connection not to be disrupted, another satellite must come into view immediately, which is then simultaneously tracked by another antenna beam for seamless handoff of the connection. So you might get disruptions if there's no satellite that passes over after the first one passes over the horizon. Now we have a tool that we want to share. I think this thing in place. We, together with the DOST ASTI and Stamina for Space program, we are tracking these LEO and MEO internet constellation satellites in any given area of the Philippines. So you can drop a pin, go to the website philsat.gov.ph, drop a pin anywhere, and then click on that go, and then it will calculate the number of satellites passing overhead over that 24-hour period. And so sometimes it takes longer. Grab a cup of coffee while you're waiting. So as these satellite constellations grow, we can therefore expect even better availability of both networks, and it's really exciting progress to see. So what is calculated here, and let me speed that up a little bit, is what we call quote-unquote availability. So you see here that increasingly over time, as the number of satellites increase, you have more satellites passing overhead, and which means possibly more seamless connection. Now, what do we mean by this availability? We're simply counting the number of satellites that pass overhead in a given area at a certain minimum elevation. If it's too low in the horizon, the buildings might block them, so you can't really communicate with them. So this is a necessary but not sufficient condition for establishing a connection to a satellite and to the internet. Actual connection, its quality and speed depends on other factors, such as, among others, the uptime of the satellite and the ground network, availability of an internet gateway, and weather conditions. Okay. So the satellites operate at extremely high frequencies and may be affected by rain and heavy and clouds, thick clouds. So this gives more compelling reason to try out these systems in the local setting, especially in the midst of the very special rain that we have in the Philippines and our weather disturbances. And so this open call, it shows more detail. Essentially, we have the remote communities, which could be community networks or places served by DICT's free Wi-Fi access points, including schools, rural health centers, government offices, disaster risk reduction management offices. They need to be connected to the internet on the left side. And so how do we do that? The satellites provide the bent pipe in between. So to bridge the gap, and we use satellites, in particular new internet satellites in LEO and MEO. So Incentivize brings in the SIOs, the satellite internet operators with their user terminals and gateways. They may opt to set up the gateway here temporarily, or it may already be existing somewhere else. Now in the deployment site, there will be representatives from DTI, DICT, DepEd, NDRMMC, the Office of Civil Defense, Department of Health, Department of National Defense, Bangko Sentral, local telcos, BASCs, ISPs to observe the tests firsthand. So an accompanying research objective is the deployment of instruments that will monitor weather conditions in these sites and log traffic and network performance data. So that's where the valuable partnership with the DOST ASTI also comes in. And so yet another update, the Incentivize team has been conducting visits to prospective communities as sites of the test deployments, including one site in Aurora province. There's an elementary school, rural health unit, evacuation center, approximately 200 households. The area has no connection to mobile signals or internet, and the community can only communicate to the main town using radios. The main town is approximately 11 kilometers away by boat. This community is severely affected by, of course, typhoons. Being on the eastern side of the Philippines, houses near the shore were damaged by Typhoon Ulysses, and all the boats that they used to support their living were also damaged, and there was no electricity for a week. So then these are feedback from the DRM officer and from the teacher in the school. Let me just read one of them in English. If the internet is available here, we don't need to travel to the municipality, 45 minutes boat ride every enrollment period when we need to use the DepEd online platform. Sometimes we stay there, especially when we need to submit reports and attend online conference. high school students of the community do not have to stay in the main town. Instead, they can also attend their online classes at home. We will use the internet also for teaching. So these are groups, of course, we want to benefit from satellite internet if only the connectivity is available in the area. And so now, just quickly a summary. To summarize this initiative for incentivize EO127, which lowers barriers to entries for groups to access satellites for internet, and also the increasing availability of new space technologies are factors that motivate or place favorable conditions for embarking on this incentivized project. So in the near term, these projects are expected to directly allow us to experience and validate firsthand the performance advantages of new satellite and space technologies, hopefully expand market entry and access that enable more healthy competition in the market, enabling rural community networks that will leverage EO127 and new market options. These new technologies support the thrust for bridging the digital divide and through satellites and rural empowerment through SSTAs. And this can also open doors for strengthening the local SSTA industry. This is where we leverage the Philippine Space Development Fund as provided by law. Lastly, of course, in the long term, we share the vision of promoting national economic development as addressing the digital divide and promoting the local industry leads to creating more jobs and opportunities for businesses and to stimulate the economy as we recover from the pandemic. Now, before I end, let me share with you this 3-volume ebook compilation we call Our Place in Space. There are plenty of examples of how we try to create value in space here in the Philippines. You can learn more about these efforts when you flip through this compilation. You can find it in the PhilSA website, philsa.gov.ph or space.gov.ph, leads you to the same place. So volume 1 is about space data mobilization. Volume 2 is on space technology. Volume 3 is about our capacity building, outreach, and sustainability efforts. So space can bridge, uplift, empower our nation, and bring hope to the people. Satellites can bridge our islands and communities. Innovations in space inspire and uplift us. Being in space, building in space empowers us. That's why PhilSA is here. So I want to thank you for your attention and magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much, PhilSA Director General Dr. Joseph Marciano. Moving on, Acting Secretary Emmanuel Ray Caintic from the Department of Information and Communications Technology, or DICT, is joining us through his recorded video. Ladies and gentlemen, join me as we watch Secretary Caintic's video on expanding the provision of internet services through inclusive access to satellite services.
Ms. Heather Variava, Charge d'Affaires of the U.S. Embassy in the Philippines. Mr. John Garrity, Chief of Party of the USAID Beacon Activity. Mr. Thomas Abel, Chief of the Digital Technology for Development of the Asian Development Bank. Mr. Joel Joseph Marciano Jr., Director General of the Philippine Space Agency. Mr. George Barcelon, President of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Gamaliel Cordoba, Commissioner of the National Telecommunications Commission. Colleagues in the government, friends from the public and private sectors, everyone, a pleasant day to us all. On behalf of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, I would like to thank the United States Agency for International Development and the Philippine Space Agency for organizing today's event. As of today, the global health crisis is beginning to wane. The world is marching towards rebuilding what was once lost and starting anew with the help of information and communications technology. However, in the 2019 National ICT Household Survey, the DICT and the Philippine Statistical Research and Training Institute, only about 1 in 5 households of the population in the country have access to internet connection at home. We at the DICT believe that connectivity is no longer a privilege, but is almost like a human right. Because of this, the government issued Executive Order number 127 for us to provide effective and affordable internet and help revitalize the post-pandemic and digital economy. Signed into law by President Rodrigo Roa Duterte back in March 10, 2021. The policy's main goal is to liberalize the access to satellite technology to allow telcos and internet service providers direct access to all satellite systems, domestic and international. This will make constructing and running broadband facilities easier for our telecommunications industry, encouraging digital infrastructure build-up, and more. The digital divide is a problem that became more apparent when the pandemic started. Given the country's archipelagic nature, deploying typical or terrestrial broadband infrastructure across the country has been a challenge logistically and in terms of cost, especially in geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas. Fortunately, newer technologies such as satellites are capable of providing internet connectivity with more flexibility in their deployment. Modern satellite technologies have the capability to propagate broadband internet access fast. The low Earth orbit satellite is an excellent addition to our solution set as it offers low latency, high throughput internet to our GIDAs. Having an opportunity for internet service providers to have direct access to satellites and to build and operate their own facilities can provide internet services at an even wider scale. This can also drive competition on pricing and innovation. More Filipinos can have universal access to quality, affordable, reliable, and secure ICT services. This in turn will promote the development and widespread use of ICT. Progress in the country's digital transformation, we must acknowledge that accessibility for all is of utmost importance. We must embrace new technologies that can bridge the digital divide and provide equal opportunities for everyone, no matter where they are or what their background is. Moving forward, the DICT is in full support of emerging technologies that can cement the country's digital infrastructure and pave the way for a better digital future. One of your DICT's main initiatives is the Free Wi-Fi for All program, which implements the managed internet services using satellite technology. This will provide fully managed VSAT internet connectivity to GIDAs across the country. This shall equip the underserved and unserved communities with internet service, which will promote knowledge building among netizens and enable them to participate and compete in the evolving information and communications age. We're also planning to expand this initiative by leasing a dedicated satellite bandwidth in the form of an indefeasible right of use, or IRU, for an overlay of satellite broadband infrastructure. This would provide bulk internet bandwidth, which includes Earth stations all across the Philippines. The IRU project shall strengthen the establishment of the Philippine Digital Infrastructure Program. This would in turn provide universal digital coverage in the fastest possible time. As such, we urge our policymakers and lawmakers from both public and private sectors to continuously support this endeavor as we look forward to the success of LEO satellites and other technology advancements that will come in the future. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
So that's Acting Secretary Emmanuel Caintic from the DICT joining us through a recorded video. Now, to dive deeper into the topic of digital connectivity and LEO constellations, we have with us today Mr. Arndt Husar, Senior Public Management Specialist at the Digital Technology for Development Unit of the Asian Development Bank. Mr. Arndt Husar facilitates the effective use of digital technology, advising ADB clients, regional departments, as well as sector and thematic groups on digital transformation. He has co-authored 2 ADB working papers on cloud computing and on low Earth orbit or LEO satellite constellations and their potential to provide digital connectivity in Asia and the Pacific. He facilitates ADB's new working group on digital technology risk assessment in ABB operations. Now, let's now please all welcome Mr. Arndt Huszar.
Thank you very much, Tricia. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Asian Development Bank. To get us more deeply immersed into the topic, I'd like to introduce you to the potential benefits and challenges around low Earth orbit satellite constellations before we get into our panel discussion. First of all, let's step back. Why satellite? Well, satellite is really the least costly and least complex method of delivering broadband in sparsely populated areas. Whenever you go below 60 inhabitants per square kilometer, that's where satellite becomes competitive. There's also locations where there's no alternative. Those are the very remote, inaccessible locations or moving assets like boats or ships. Third one is that you can rapidly deploy satellite. Provided that satellites are overhead and operational, ground stations are in place, and stable power supply is available on location, a very important point when it comes to off-grid locations. The resilience of satellites as space-based assets is unbeatable in the case of disasters. You do have to take care of the ground infrastructure, but a satellite up there cannot be reached by any of our inclement weather events, for example. Technological advances. Global capacity is rapidly increasing, and that comes with a drop in latency that is now rivaling fixed broadband. Soon there will be connectivity available with feature and smartphones directly from satellites. And finally, costs. Costs for satellite production, terminals, and launches have been reducing, and that should eventually be passed on to consumers. I want to briefly show this diagram that shows the place for satellite technology within the overall digital connectivity infrastructure. Satellite plays a role in mid-mile. It's the backhaul that provides even your towers, your telco towers, connectivity, but also the last mile. And a lot of the representatives of companies today that we'll be hearing from are in the space of providing direct access to consumers, be it businesses or individuals, government facilities, and others, to internet or to phone connectivity. Now, this was already briefly introduced, the differences between the different orbits. I just want to emphasize once more that the big change that we're seeing is a drop in latency, which you can see here under LEO has dropped significantly. Latency is the speed at which a signal travels from the ground up to the satellite and back. And therefore, we see more opportunities for use cases that require this kind of fast connection. The number of satellites has massively increased over the last few years. And this is a necessity because if you get closer to Earth, you are going to have a smaller field that you're a smaller range of coverage geographically. You need to have many more satellites if you want to have a global network. And with LEO, you really don't have much choice because the satellites keep moving. So in comparison to the geostationary satellites that are stationary over one location, with LEO and with MEO, you do need to have many more so you can compensate for this constantly moving constellation, as we call it. Another highlight I want to give is on spectrum. And this diagram looks at first a little puzzling. The bands, the various bands of frequencies are seen here at the bottom, and they range from L to V. And you can see that there are differences in how they're affected by, for example, rain, is the lowest bar here. Whereas the L spectrum and S spectrum don't see much impact. In a V frequency, you would already see significant impact by rain. Today, we have representatives of the following companies: AST SpaceMobile, OneWeb, SpaceX Starlink, and Amazon Kuiper. And you can see here that they operate in different frequencies, and their services will be differently put together in terms of the technology and have different impact when it comes to these various factors. Now, the combination of spectrum availability and spectrum reuse really allows for more capacity. And that's a big change. The more we move towards Ku band and Ka band, the more we can reuse that spectrum and the more spectrum becomes available. And that brings great capacity into the picture. Interesting to point out the difference between OneWeb, SpaceX, Amazon, and AST SpaceMobile, which is using mobile spectrum for space and has a different business model, as we will hear about later. Now, let's go to the adoption challenges and to the issues that we as a development bank would like to see addressed. Number one, why do we have the digital divide that's so persistent in our region? Affordability is a key factor. While we can see that many countries in Asia and the Pacific have been able to expand their coverage and even lower costs, there is a significant portion of the population that still finds these offers unaffordable. And even if you have coverage, many people are not using mobile internet services yet. That can be an issue. So we've seen the challenges around the pandemic in terms of bringing students onto online education services, for example. Device requirements. Broadband satellite requires terminals or roof-mounted antennas. And direct-to-handset satellite connectivity may require new devices. We will hear from AST that they have a different solution. In terms of availability of power, fixed satellite terminals require 50 to 150 watts of electricity. That's a challenge when you're off-grid, somewhere on an island, remote from the power supply. In that case, you need to compensate with a local power supply, and that can be an issue and drives up cost. Now, in terms of one overview slide of the adoption challenges, I have this one here to offer. The first one is regarding network. In order to operate, as we already heard from the DG, licenses and permits need to be in place, and there have been some significant improvements made in the regulatory frameworks in the Philippines. Ground infrastructure needs to be in place. We need to have satellite network portals or ground stations. We need to have towers and power supply. And we do note that Asia Pacific usually comes second in terms of the rollout. That has something to do with the latitude at which these LEO satellites are launched or placed in orbit. And we can now see improvements towards the second part of this year. We should see global coverage by some of these constellations. On to pricing. The business models usually focus on high-value market segments. The subscriptions are not cheap, and the hardware needs to be bought as well. There's an exception with the direct-to-handset solution by AST SpaceMobile, but hardware means you have to have an antenna and you have to get that installed, and so that's a one-time cost that you will incur. The question also is, for some of the constellations that don't necessarily need ground stations in every country because they have wider coverage areas, will these savings be passed on to consumers? And also a point about pricing where we have the question whether eventually these LEO offers will be competitive with the GEO high throughput satellite offers that are already available in the market, which are often used for community or free Wi-Fi offers. And finally, the market fit. Low latency, the speed at which the signal travels back and forth between a satellite and the ground, is not necessarily significant for all use cases. For example, agricultural IoT sensors, field reporting, citizen services, basic financial products may not need that rapid speed. But as soon as we move into interactive voice and video communication, we do require low latency. For example, for online education or telehealth. And then there are these super low latency demand areas like voice over LTE, gaming, military security, or market trading. So these are some that really are going to be looking forward to new opportunities with LEO. I close with the slide that is about the challenges, but I do want to emphasize that we see a lot of opportunity in trying out LEO, seeing how it fits into the picture and whether we can do better in addressing the digital divide in Asia and the Pacific. I really look forward to the conversation in the panel now and hand over to John Garrity, who is going to be moderating. Thank you very much.
All
Okay,
right.
go ahead, Trisha.
All right, sorry for that. Thank you, Mr. Arndt. I'm sorry. At this point, again, let's all welcome back Mr. John Garrity for the moderated panel discussion of the webinar. And at this point, we'd also like to invite our participants and our audience participating in the session to please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A box, because this will be your chance to have your questions answered during this part of the program, the moderated panel discussion. All right, take it away, John.
Great, thank you, Trisha, and thank you, Arndt, for the excellent and balanced overview of how LEO constellations fit in overall satellite connectivity. You did a great job summarizing the analysis into just 10 minutes, and I know that you and the digital technology team at the ADB have carried forth exploring how satellite connectivity in general can support applications and services that drive economic and social development, particularly for ADB member states. So as mentioned, we're going to turn now to hear directly from LEO satellite providers themselves to share with us how they view their potential role in developing internet connectivity options in the Philippines. So I'd like to ask Fariba Malouf from Amazon's Project Kuiper, Bala Balamurali from OneWeb, Jonathan Haufeller from SpaceX Starlink, and Chris Ivory from AST Space Mobile to please turn on your cameras and your microphones. I'll do brief introductions and ask each of you to share more with us about yourselves and your organizations. So Fariba Malouf is corporate counsel for Amazon's Project Kuiper in the Asia Pacific region. Based in Sydney, Australia, Fariba supports Project Kuiper's mission to launch a constellation of low Earth orbit satellites to deliver fast, affordable broadband to unserved and underserved communities around the world. And Fariba has worked extensively in the Asia Pacific region on a broad range of regulatory, digital technology, and commercial matters. Bala Balamurali is OneWeb's regional director for Southeast Asia and Southeast and East Asia, which is a high growth region for OneWeb, with a focus particularly on extending existing networks into harder to reach locations for governments and mobility industries such as aviation and maritime. With over 15 years of experience in strategy and business development in satellite communications in Asia, Bala leads OneWeb's business development efforts in the region. Jonathan Haufeller is SpaceX's Vice President of Starlink Commercial Sales. He leads the sales and creation of the company's Starlink business and enterprise service products, and also leads the creation and development of Starlink's charitable efforts, a program designed to bring connectivity to economically challenged areas around the globe through a network of benefactors. Jonathan joined SpaceX in 2007 and previously led the company's commercial launch and private human spaceflight endeavors, successfully expanding SpaceX's customer base across the globe. And we also have Chris Ivory. Chris Ivory is Chief Commercial Officer for AST Space Mobile, with over 26 years of senior level experience in the satellite and telecommunications industry. Most recently, he was Executive Vice President and General Manager of Commercial Solutions for Globecom, where he served as the business unit leader for satellite services across all of the commercial vertical market segments. He has also held leadership positions at several telecom companies in the US, Mexico, and Argentina. So clearly we have a fascinating group of experts from LEO satellite providers. And after hearing from Arndt at the ADB in the previous presentation about the differences between LEO versus other types of satellite broadband constellation systems, I'd like to go through and ask each of you firstly to introduce yourselves, your satellite broadband solutions, asking you to stress the unique characteristics of your own company's intervention. So maybe let's start with Fariba to tell us about Amazon's Project Kuiper. Fariba?
Sure. Thank you very much, John. And thank you very much for inviting me and Amazon to be part of today's panel discussion. Project Kuiper will deliver fast and affordable broadband connectivity to unserved and underserved communities around the world, including in the Philippines. Kuiper's system is designed to serve customers beyond the reach of traditional fiber and wireless networks, and is well suited to enhance connectivity to hard-to-reach places of the Philippines, including rural and remote areas. Kuiper's high-speed, low-latency services can support real-time communications and innovative applications, Internet of Things connectivity, and mobility across land, aeronautical, and maritime transport routes. Enhanced connectivity will empower local communities, small and medium businesses, and local public sector services in their digitalization and create economic, education, and social development opportunities. One of the key guiding principles for Project Kuiper is affordability, to provide affordable broadband services with low-cost terminal equipment. Size is a critical factor in the cost of these devices. Our customer terminal will have a diameter of 30 centimeters, which is roughly the size of a pizza box. It's considerably smaller and lighter than legacy designs. It will be easy to install and will support download speeds of up to 400 megabits per second for consumer services. Our enterprise terminals will be larger and able to support higher download speeds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fariba, for that introduction. So let's turn maybe now to OneWeb. Bala Morali, tell us about OneWeb. Tell us about your focus and some of the unique characteristics about OneWeb's deployment.
So John, thank you, and thanks for inviting me and OneWeb to this panel. Yeah, so I think the speakers before me have done a brilliant job in explaining what LEOs are and what's different about LEOs and MEOs and GEOs. So I'll focus more on what's different with OneWeb. So OneWeb is not quite a mega constellation. It is sort of like a large constellation we have, because the orbital altitude of our satellites is 1,200 kilometers rather than the lower ones. Therefore, we need only about 648 satellites to provide global coverage. Then the next big difference with OneWeb is that our focus is more on the middle mile rather than the last mile. So what OneWeb's offering is a partnership to those with local connectivity systems rather than to become the local connector. So for example, if you took the Philippines, our goal is not to become the fourth operator, but to actually support the existing three and expand their reach and complement the services they're able to offer. Then in terms of the target markets and how we plan to deliver this service, we are very much driven by use cases that are brought to us by the customer. Because you're in the middle and the middle mile, and we offer what we, basically a layer 3 IP connectivity service. There's a lot of flexibility built into our system. So if you're an enterprise user who just wants one of your remote sites, like a bank, connected to the network, we can do that. At the same time, if you have your own network and you want to complement and make it into a private network, we can do that. We can also go at a country level. I mean, we can of course provide backhaul, cellular backhaul extension to mobile operators, but also at a country level, if you want an entire country with a virtual satellite, then that also can be carved out of the OneWeb network. So it comes with a lot of flexibility. The thing is, of course, as Ant pointed out, there is a bunch of real life challenges that all the LEO operators are going to be faced with: affordability, device requirements, power requirements. So this is, I think, this is one of the main things that bothers us as well, because like you said, if you're going to a remote area that's got no connection, the chances are they've got no power. And then, if you're going to consume 50 to 150 watts of the little available power, then, then you're not really helping the situation. So this is one of the reasons why, as the market evolves and the technology evolves, we want to try and evolve with it rather than try and jump to the far end and then try to figure out we don't quite fit with what the market needs. So by working with partners, we're trying to find workarounds for these challenges. And then with our next generation, get closer and closer to some of those numbers and targets that Ant pointed out. Hope that helps.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bala, for that introduction to OneWeb. So let's turn to SpaceX, Starlink now. Jonathan Hoffeller, to tell us a little bit about, okay, what's different about Starlink? I know, already you have nearly 2,000 satellites in orbit, if not more. You have slightly different constellation design from OneWeb, and not really a polar constellation design that OneWeb has, but more of an incline. So Over to you, Jonathan, to tell us about SpaceX Starlink.
All right, great. Excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me. And thanks to the 780 people that are online listening to us talk about fascinating LEO constellations. Our relationship with the Philippines actually started, Dr. Marciano had mentioned the Maya 1, Maya 3, and Maya 4 satellites, which we actually launched on our Dragon capsules over the last couple of years. So we're looking forward to continuing that relationship in the Philippines. You mentioned it, like the main, there's a lot of differentiators. I think the biggest one is that we are operating. We have the several thousand satellites on orbit. We have 250,000 current subscribers. That goes across consumer, that goes across enterprise, education, energy, banking. We are servicing these people today across the globe in over 29 countries, 32 different municipalities. And we're just getting started. So we're warming up. We really hope that the Philippines will be one of the next ones on the list that we can get in and provide connectivity. The unique part is the impact that we've already made over the last several years that we're doing. And some of the previous speakers had talked about the impact. We've seen this firsthand. We've delivered to schools and to villages across these countries that they have said, you know, we're being left behind. I had one person say, like, I thought I was invisible to the world, which was an incredibly impactful statement to me. Like, nobody should be invisible to the world. And so having the impact that we have is truly incredible. We're seeing it, again, small businesses, we're seeing it in the banking, being able to provide this connectivity, super low latency. I noticed on one of the previous charts, it said ultra low latency is 150 milliseconds. We are well below that target with our LEO constellation. And so, you know, we're continuing. I think one of the other big differentiators is that we're vertically integrated. We build our own rockets, we build our own satellites. Currently we've ramped up production to 8 satellites a day now, launching every 2 weeks, roughly every 2 weeks, on the order of 50 satellites. So our Gen 1 constellation is operational. We're deploying our Gen 1.5 with the lasers. You had mentioned about the Polar constellation. That shell is beginning deployment as well. So we will have that polar coverage. And then moving on to Gen 2. The sheer amount of capacity that we have on orbit is unprecedented. And as I mentioned, we're just getting started. So excited to be here and to answer questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And I know on the technological side, I think across the board, you know, Fariba's mentioned this and Bala has mentioned this, but yeah, on the technology side, I think there's some really interesting developments that you all are working on across the board, across the different companies for your next generation satellites, including you know, inter-satellite links. So it'd be great to hear more about that. But first, let's turn over to Chris. Chris Ivory from AST Space Mobile. I know I have toddlers, so we watch a lot of Sesame Street, and you know, there's always that game of, you know, one of these is not like the others. And so AST Space Mobile is slightly different from the focus of Kuiper, OneWeb, and Starlink. So Chris, tell us about AST Space Mobile.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. And it's an honor to be here and allowing me to be part of this panel. And you said it, that we're a little different in many ways from my other colleagues on the panel. One, we're kind of more of the new kids to the block, one of the newer companies that you know, SpaceX, OneWeb, and Amazon are certainly well-known organizations. But AST, we are a satellite designer and manufacturer. We're in the process of testing and building a low Earth orbit satellite constellation that will connect directly to standard mobile devices. So this means that we do not require any change to the mobile device. It means no SIM card change, no hardware, no firmware, no software, no app is required. All of the mobile phones that all of us have sitting right next to us today will be compatible with our service, and we do this in close cooperation with in close partnership with the licensed mobile network operators. We have a wholesale model where our customers are going to be the mobile operators. The end users are going to access our service through the mobile operators. And our objective is is to fill the gaps of where there is no terrestrial service today that is provided either in 2G, 4G, or 5G, and enable the mobile operators to provide 100% geographic, 100% population coverage, including the oceans. And we do this, and what's very important to understand is we do this in a market-based pricing. So even in low ARPU markets like the Philippines, where the ARPU may be $2 or $3 per month, we have a low enough cost base that we're going to be able to offer that same exact pricing for rural connectivity, rural broadband, cellular broadband connectivity to the rural unconnected areas. Quickly, since not too many folks probably have heard of us, we're a publicly traded company in the United States, trading on NASDAQ. Our key investors are Vodafone, American Tower, Rakuten, and Samsung. We've actually been quite active in the Philippines market. We do have a close partnership with Smart and are actively working with them. And we're targeting to have service commercially available the second half of next year. Later this year, actually in a few months, we're going to be launching our second test satellite on SpaceX. And actually, we'll be ride sharing with some of Jonathan's Starlink satellites. So we're very excited about that. And that's going to enable us to do live testing to standard mobile devices. And we'll be performing these tests also in the Philippines.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So thanks for that explanation of how your focus is slightly different, but it's adjacent to the others. Maybe just double clicking a little bit into that. You mentioned that your model is to work directly with the mobile network operators and essentially help to extend their networks. Could you just maybe tell us a little bit about more of that? I mean, is that primarily the market segment that you guys were focused on, is the MNOs?
Yeah, that's really our go-to market is to not compete with the mobile operators, but to enable them to monetize their nationwide spectrum. We do not require any special allocations of spectrum. We can coexist with their current terrestrial network and do it in a non-interference way. And we felt that the most efficient way is to partner with the already licensed operators. They have the distribution, they have the market know-how, and you can look at us as just like an infrastructure partner to them, where we're extending their 2G, 4G, 5G coverage into the areas that they want to use our service.
Gotcha. Okay. So then maybe let's go back to SpaceX Starlink and Jonathan. I mean, you all have been looking at the Philippines. You're familiar with the geographic dispersion here, over 7,100 islands in the Philippines, over 100 million people. So tell us about how you see the market in the Philippines and what sort of segments are you planning to focus on?
Yeah, great question. Certainly, we have already seen a pretty tremendous response from people that are aware of Starlink about the need for connectivity. There's 110 million people across the country. There's a lot of need, and they're going to need it through a lot of different technologies. We've been most vocal about our direct-to-consumer, but one of my main focuses is enterprise. So doing the business B2B stuff. So we are working with maritime vessels. We're working with banks. We're working with the disaster resiliency with the governments. So a lot more, and we're just not public about it as much as we are in other venues. Aviation is a really big one. Digital payments, ATMs, that sort of stuff. As the country needs to build out infrastructure to support economy, it's not just connecting homes for Netflix or video usage. There's a lot of economy growth that will depend on connectivity, as we've seen small business owners wanting to sell to a global market. So a backhaul is another big one that I haven't mentioned. We are already contracted with several companies for backhaul across the globe. And this is something that complements fiber very well. Like our technology with the super high low latency or high throughput low latency is perfect for these cell phone providers that want to connect the rural villages but don't want to invest in the infrastructure to dredge fiber out there, or in many cases, like you said, number of islands, it's impossible, right? And so our technology is ideal for this, and we've seen a great response from the folks in the Philippines and around the globe that this technology works.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting to hear the enterprise focus and the different market segments that you are looking at. I mean, maritime in the Philippines is very significant. I heard Dr. Marciano, he's given a quote where the number of people that ride on, use boat transit and transport in the Philippines, I think it's greater than aviation in the Philippines. So,
and I'll add on that too, like, sorry to interrupt, like the fact that we build our own terminals, we build our own phased array, it's all done in-house to leverage the consumer panel into an enterprise panel for maritime. It is a very simple adaptation to make it ready. It's, no moving parts. You basically have to ruggedize it for the different environments. And so we've been able to iterate on that very quickly. We're already on boats as we speak. We're already on planes as we speak. And the results have been great.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jonathan. So Bala and OneWeb, it sounds as though maybe you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you straddle maybe some of the similar sort of focuses of AST Space Mobile, not direct to mobile consumers, but certainly on cellular backhaul that even Jonathan's talking about for SpaceX. But also, I imagine there's an enterprise focus. Can you share the market segments that OneWeb is looking at?
Sure. So just to touch on the cellular backhaul stuff. So the way we look at providing the service, as our customers tend to be either other networks or people with other network capability, we try to provide them sort of network features that they will need. So if you're going to, for example, have carry voice, then you'll need a different class of service. So the OneWeb plans don't just come with a best effort service. So they come with different classes of service. You can have a dedicated a link, which is basically like a leased line. So you only use that. And within that, you can then further segment, slice up the service into the classes of service. For example, if you're going to carry voice, then we have a best effort, expedited forwarding class of service. And then you have an assured class of service, for example, if you're doing IoT type service. And then we can also do symmetrical, because voice generally tends to be symmetrical. So you and I speak, so we need to have the same amount of sort of capacity available on both sides and not contended while we are speaking on it. So what OneWeb has is it sort of developed the detail within the service that we provide, so that the end network that we're selling to can pick and choose the type of service they need. So they can go from one extreme end where, let's say you're talking about best efforts community Wi-Fi, all the way to a dedicated link that is used by a mobile operator for backhaul purposes. So what we've tried to do is to mimic the requirements of our partner network and our partner customers as much as possible, so that it looks and feels like an IP local loop service that you're buying, rather than the traditional satellite service that you would buy. So that's one of the big differences between sort of providing an end user service and a middle mile service. But at an enterprise level, it's quite different. So we can also do the enterprise piece where you will need to help them connect to their IP VPN networks, or even sort of individual bank branches or mining sites and that sort of stuff, where it can become a single service. But of course, it also is a matter of price. So, you don't want to be paying for a complete dedicated circuit if you're only going to be using it for your general emails and normal sort of browsing and that sort of traffic. So we have a different class and different package of service plans for the enterprise customers. Again, we have a range of user terminals, and as with my Starlink colleagues, we also go up, pretty much are able to sort of provide services for land, maritime, aviation. So there are different types of service terminals. And also on the land, for land use, we also have terminals that may be used by cellular operators, which are parabolic and capable of very high data speeds, as well as flat panel phased array antennas, which is more suitable for enterprise customers. So there's a wide range of mix and match capability that comes in OneWeb.
Okay, thank you, Bala. And of course, moving to Fariba on Amazon and Project Kuiper. I know that there's a lot still in development, but it'd be very interesting to hear the focus that you all have on the market, and also, if you're able to share the integration with AWS.
Sure, thanks very much, John. So Kuiper, we are building a flexible system which will be capable of serving a wide range of customers. And in the Philippines, we are planning to provide home internet services to households at locally affordable prices. And, my colleagues at OneWeb and SpaceX have mentioned enterprise connectivity for enterprise. It's certainly an area of focus as well. But I read a statistic that in the Philippines, 99.51% of registered businesses are in fact micro, small, and medium businesses, and they generate over 5 million jobs. And so connecting these smaller and medium businesses will generate a lot of economic benefit and help develop local economies as well. And that is an area of focus. We will have mobility services, so providing connectivity for vessels and aviation. And the last thing I'd like to highlight is services that support emergency preparedness. A portable terminal that's easy to deploy in the event of a local emergency to create some climate resiliency for customers in the Philippines.
Yeah, that's a key point, and I think one of the things that we've seen in the Philippines is the renewed attention to satellite connectivity, particularly in response or in the aftermath of a number of the recent typhoons, like Typhoon Odette in December, that really knocked out communications and power in the lower Visayas and northern Mindanao. So satellite connectivity for resilience and redundancy is a big issue. And that's interesting to hear about the home internet services plan for Kuiper. Maybe staying with you, Fariba, just to go a little bit further, your role as a corporate counsel, I wanted to turn the discussion a little bit to the policy and regulatory side. We heard from DICT Acting Secretary Manny Caintic about the Executive Order 127. We also know that there seems to be greater competition and investment now made possible because of EO 127 on satellite broadband access, as well as the passage of the amendments to the Public Services Act that now allows for foreign investment in telecommunications. So I just wanted to ask, what sort of challenges are you all still watching and looking at and trying to address, policy challenges or otherwise, but just challenges that remain as you consider your plans in entering the Philippines?
Thanks, John. From my perspective, I'd like to focus on what creates an enabling environment for satellite services in the Philippines. And I'd say that there are three main ingredients. The first is streamlined administrative processes for license applications and grants with reasonable fees and reporting requirements, as well as flexible licensing mechanisms. Blanket licensing and license exemptions are both examples of flexible, simplified licensing mechanisms that work for large-scale deployments of customer terminals operating within certain technical characteristics that are shown not to cause interference to other services. The second ingredient is clear and fair rules for spectrum sharing between and among different operators. This supports new entrants and creates an environment capable of accommodating multiple services that will benefit, the interests of customers in the Philippines at large. And the third ingredient is to ensure continued access to spectrum that is required for satellite services in the Philippines. The Ka band is used by hundreds of GSO and thousands of non-GSO satellites everywhere. And Project Kuiper's system is a Ka band system. So these ingredients taken together will create an enabling environment, certainty, and help, speedy deployment for satellite services in the country.
Okay. So the administrative processes on licensing, spectrum issues, certainly issues that I think that folks continue to work on in the Philippines to create a more competitive and dynamic market here. Bala, over to you in terms of challenges, the continued challenges that remain, policy or otherwise.
Thanks. So, from a service distribution point of view, because of the approach we take of working with local partners, they usually tend to be licensed telecommunications operators, or even licensed VSAT service providers who already have the various approvals they need to offer service. So then it becomes the additional bit of getting landing rights, for example, to offer OneWeb services. And I think the whole EO 127 type of approach helps us with that. But I think I'd like to the main issue I'd like to pick on, I think, is also what was already mentioned by our colleague from Amazon, Fariba. The whole issue about spectrum sharing and the use of spectrum in a manner that is fair and something that you can rely on. So the ITU has very clear radio regulation rules, and if the countries can try and depend and operate to the ITU agreed rules and not come up with local deviations from that, that makes it a lot easier for us to get access to these markets and offer service without causing harmful interference or receiving harmful interference. And that is clearly one of the concerns that we have too. We for our user terminals operate in the KU band, and our gateways use Ka band for connectivity. So it's slightly less of a problem for us than some of the networks that mainly depend on Ka for user services. But it is still a concern for us. So we would very much like to work with the local regulators to see if we can reserve the satellite spectrum and give us some certainty of continuity that we can actually work in these areas.
Gotcha. Okay. So really focusing on trying to adopt and follow ITU good practices when it comes to spectrum sharing for satellite.
Yes.
Jonathan, what about SpaceX? I mean, what challenges exist?
Well, I'll have to say, we actually don't see any inherent issues with entering the Philippines. In fact, I applaud the regulators for being leaning open to competition, and we're excited to get into the Philippines pretty soon.
Okay, thanks for that. And Chris, what about you? I mean, also curious on the spectrum side, if there are issues there, or it's pretty much a given because your partners are the mobile network operators who have the spectrum.
Well, it's a couple of things, because we're somewhat unique where we are using the mobile operators cellular spectrum, but what we've always stressed to all of the regulators that we meet is to have policies that are flexible enough for innovative technologies that will help close the digital divide and provide affordable, cellular, broadband cellular connectivity into the rural areas. We're also big proponents of flexible use of spectrum. These cellular operators spend hundreds, if not billions of dollars for their spectrum, and we would like to see that they have the right to use that spectrum any way they want, regardless if it's from a satellite or from an airplane or from a tower, as long as we're not creating any type of harmful interference. And so we really would love to see policies that embrace that, and for technologies that are going to provide affordable rural connectivity for broadband access.
Okay. And interesting to hear that nobody's really focused in on any investment challenges or setting up operations in the Philippines. So that's good to know. We have a few minutes left. I know that I need to stick to time because we have a few more speakers, but I want to ask maybe another set of questions, then also ask the panelists for closing remarks. But also mention that we're getting a ton of questions in the Q&A box. So if the panelists could also just stay afterwards and answer any questions that they find relevant based on their experience. But maybe one more question. I mean, I think one of the things that comes up a bit, and we heard about it in Dr. Marciano's presentation, as well as in Art's presentation, are some of the inherent challenges in the Philippines with potential LEO service here. So there's certainly the affordability question because of the ARPU levels, and how that plays out into the cost of services and terminals. So it'd be great to hear maybe your thoughts on some of these issues that remain top of mind for if LEO can work here. So there's affordability is one of them. A second one is the quality of service due to weather conditions, right? With the heavy rains, rainy season, and then the number of typhoons that come through the Philippines. So that's really the third one. It's like hardware viability, considering the typhoon level winds that the Philippines experiences several times a year. So just want to open it up to whoever wants to jump in and talk about how you're addressing some of these challenges of operating in the Philippines. Affordability, quality of service with rains, and then also the harsh weather conditions and typhoons. Anybody?
Right. I'll start off. I'll jump in. I mean, from a weather standpoint, we require very little infrastructure, but we would be looking at putting in diversity of diverse gateways, so that if one part of the Philippines is affected, we could still have a continuity of service. From an affordability standpoint, I'm going to change it and I'm going to go very quickly. Is that in order to get internet into the hands or on the phone for people that are living in rural areas, there certainly is going to have to be some type of program from subsidization of handsets, because smartphones are, for many folks in the rural areas is out of their reach from an affordability standpoint. So we would love to look for different programs in different ways, and even with the ADB of how can we help subsidize those handsets for affordable broadband access in the rural areas.
I can jump in too on the affordability aspect. Certainly, the cost of the units is going to correlate to how much utility there is. And so I think one of the unique things that we have, again, is that we are vertically integrated. We are building our own terminals, and by being able to be in control of that, we've already been able to continuously refine our design. We've cut our cost of our terminal by 2/3 already. And so working to find ways to further that cost reduction so we can pass that along to the customers. The other bit is how you connect to folks. So I mentioned, there's obviously the direct to home piece of it. But using other platforms like community centers, schools, which we've already connected to date, is another way to get people connected and share the cost of any equipment and services.
Thanks, Jonathan.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I'm off mute. I'll jump in there and just share from Amazon's perspective that Amazon has a long-standing commitment to low prices, and Project Kuiper is designed to serve the underserved and unserved communities around the world. And we're certainly extending that to the equipment we are developing in-house at Project Kuiper as well. I shared that, you know, our customer terminal is significantly smaller than legacy designs, and size is a key factor to cost.
Okay. Thanks, Frieda. Bala, any words?
Yes, as with everybody else, we are committed to very low, keeping costs as low as possible. But I think, as a general point, in the satellite connectivity space, we're not, at least not yet, going to be at a comparable level to what users in the terrestrial world are used to. And, there's been massive improvements. If you go back 10 years ago to what it is today, the cost per megabit per second has come down massively, but it's still not at a point where, you can say it's the same as a mobile operator, but I think we're very, very close to it. But so I think there's also another angle that one needs to look at. So when you look at a cellular base station that's sitting in the middle of Metro Manila, its economics will be very different to if you're looking at a cell site in the middle of an island in Palawan, for example. The yield you're going to get out of it, and therefore the economics of it will be very different. So when you look at it as a network, when you combine all of these, it makes sense for the network. And also, if you look at countries like Indonesia, where the government has taken an active role in saying, look, it's our responsibility also to make sure everybody gets connected. I mean, yeah, we can do so much, but we can't, end of the day, these are all for-profit networks. So we need to make sure that not just our satellite link budget closes the loop, but it also our commercial link budget also needs to close. So what we're also doing is we're working with organizations that are committed to connecting the unconnected in all of these various markets that we're in, and then of course within reason keep our prices as low as possible so that the additional or the support that's needed isn't huge. I mean, I'm not saying that is the only way we do it, because that's for when you're connecting the unconnected in the very remote areas. But when you're looking at enterprise and cellular operators, it's a different story. And, we are more comparable or better than many of the solutions they've had in the past. But with regards to weather in the Philippines, at least, OneWeb will serve the Philippines through multiple gateways outside of the Philippines. So if at any one time, one particular area is severely affected and, we need to maybe even a terminal damaged, which is very possible, you will not lose coverage for the whole country. So it is just a matter of that particular terminal being replaced or repaired, but we can still continue to serve the rest of the country with the redundant gateways as well as the POP network that we have.
Right. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really exciting things is that we're actually having this conversation about how satellite connectivity can be affordable, depending on how you define affordability, right? I mean, there's certainly options of community Wi-Fi, as have been mentioned, or if you have an anchor tenancy from a local government unit or some other sort of public a subsidy that's purchasing that connectivity. So just the fact that the technology has advanced so much that we are seeing somewhat of a more competitive offers from satellite broadband is exciting when we think about closing the digital divide. So I know we're at time, we're slightly over, but this was fascinating. And it's great to be able to hear the different perspectives all in one room. I wish we had a few more hours and also the ability to see maybe some slides, but we'll save that for another time. But before we release the panel, maybe if we can just go through and just have sort of the last word from each of you, whatever's top of mind or what to watch out for next or just any general thoughts you have about this issue of closing the digital divide with LEO in the Philippines. So let's start again with Fariba.
Thank you, John. I found it a really interesting discussion today as well. So again, thank you for inviting me and Amazon to be part of today's forum. There are billions of people around the world who do not have fast, reliable internet. And I think it will take multiple satellite constellations, terrestrial service providers, fiber and wireless solutions to help to bridge the divide. Amazon looks forward to being one of those service providers through Project Kuiper. And one exciting development to share is that we will be launching test satellites later this year, and look forward to deploying the rest of our constellation from there. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Fariba. Bala, last word.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And OneWeb, I think we're really excited to work with the Philippines. We already have a very close working relationship with PhilSA, DICT, and many other partners in the Philippines, and we're working actively with a number of downstream partners, partner networks, to bring the benefit of OneWeb services, which hopefully will be available, which was due to be available at the end of this year, but we are slightly delayed thanks to a slight setback in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But we will be offering our services from early next year, and we look forward to serving the unserved in the Philippines.
Thank you, Bala. Jonathan, over to you.
Yeah, again, thank you for having me join the panel. Last word is that the demand is real, and people need it today. We can provide that today. We are standing by for the folks that want to go out tonight and look up at the sky. Our satellites are up there, several thousand of them waiting to connect the Philippines. I think it's a great a fit between Starlink in the Philippines, and we're looking forward to connecting. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Chris, final word of the panel.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. And thank you very much for allowing myself and AST Space Home to be part of this. So, we're really looking forward to testing our service later this year in the Philippines, and then targeting for a commercial launch the second half of next year. And also working closely with the regulator and our MNO partners in the Philippines for going back to what I was saying is, hopefully the flexible use of spectrum and allowing that and receiving regulatory approvals to have the service to being able to be tested, but also all of our services for streamlined landing rights in the Philippines.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you to all the panelists. I think we're all very excited to be able to maybe consider how LEO can be one of the solutions that helps to improve quality of service, coverage, and affordability in the Philippines. So we will stay tuned. And please do stick around for answering any of the questions in the Q&A that you feel comfortable. So with that, thank you to the panelists, and I'll turn it back over to Tricia.
Thank you, John, and thank you to our esteemed panelists for that very informative and engaging discussion. Now, when we talk about bridging the digital divide through the use of satellite internet, of course, we also need to talk about digital finance and financial inclusivity. And for that, we have for this session a resource speaker from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or the Central Bank of the Philippines. She is the director of the Financial Inclusion Office of the Central Bank. She's deeply involved in various initiatives to drive the BSP's financial inclusion agenda forward. These include policy development and advocacy work with a particular focus on inclusive digital finance, MSMEs, or micro, small, and medium enterprises, and agriculture financing. Prior to her current assignment, she was involved in the strategy management and enterprise project management program of the BSP. So without further ado, let's all welcome Director Ellen Joy Suficiencia of the Central Bank of the Philippines. Good morning, ma'am. Hi, Director Sufficiencia. I think we are having some audio glitch. I couldn't hear you, ma'am. Okay, so let's give some time for Director Sufficiencia to fix her technical glitch. So if it's all right, maybe we can call on our next speaker to further enrich our discussion this morning on the financial aspect of digital connectivity through satellite internet, particularly on the use of e-commerce in various segments of rural economies. We are joined this morning by Mr. George Barcelon. Good morning, sir. So hi, good morning, sir. So just let me introduce you briefly. So he's the president of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or PCCI. It's the largest business organization in the country. Mr. Barcelon also represents the private sector in the Industry Development Council and National Competitive Council. He is also one of the 3 Philippine representatives to the ASEAN Business Advisory Council and the private sector representative to the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council. So let's please all welcome Mr. George Barcelon. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Thank you, Tricia. Mr. John Garrity, USH Beacon Activity Chief of Party, Mr. Ryan Wasburn, USAID Philippine Mission Director, distinguished guests, panelists, partners in innovations, good morning. Before the pandemic, our country has been growing faster than most Southeast Asian countries as a result of our strong macroeconomic fundamentals and the higher budget allocations and attention government gave to developing our country's transport infrastructure. Our GDP growth averaged at more than 6% per annum in the last 10 years before 2020. The economic growth significantly slowed down in 2020 in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting economic challenges. E-commerce became the survival tool of many businesses. With shops closed and consumer interactions forced to go online, the e-commerce industry skyrocketed. Data from the Department of Trade and Industry shows that between 2019 and 2020, online media usage and e-commerce saw a compound annual growth rate of 27% and 57% respectively. Currently, e-commerce revenue contributes 3.4% or $12 billion to our country's GDP. Government plans to increase this to 5.5%, equivalent to $24 billion this year. This requires a big leap from the current state of telecom infrastructure and internet penetration. After hearing the interesting discussion by our 4 panelists from Amazon, Space Mobile, SpaceX, and also OneWeb, it's very uplifting that all these companies are considering the Philippines in their investment to expand the access to internet via satellite. While Jack Ma's observation in China that the digital gap is not a technology problem, but a consciousness problem, a preparedness problem, and whether or not you're ready to accept this advances issues. Here in the Philippines, the challenge is quite the opposite. As I mentioned earlier, we're quite behind the curve as far as telecom infrastructure and internet availability. But our young English literate population are tech savvy, digitally forward, and they are well versed in various digital platforms. They surely can adopt the e-commerce that will bring us to become one of the front runner in technology in Southeast Asia under the e-commerce roadmap. Let me cite figures from a study made by the Asia Foundation and the Better Broadband Alliance that essentially documents the challenges of access, quality, and cost of internet connectivity to our country. About 45% of our population of 110 million remain unconnected to the internet. The Philippines' Wi-Fi speed ranked 4th slowest of 88 countries in OpenSignal 2018 State of LTE, and recorded the poorest overall mobile video experience of 69 countries in OpenSignal's 2018 State of Mobile Video. I believe we have jumped up a few level, and we're not as bad as before, but we're still behind. Fixed broadband service costs consumers 7.1% of gross national income per capita per month, well above the 5% affordability threshold recommended by the International Telecommunications Union. This is a reality that we are faced with: poor access, low quality, and high cost of connectivity. To increase the use of e-commerce in various segments of the rural economies, affordable and reliable internet must be present for small entrepreneurs, even those in the informal sector, to access market, to ease transaction, and to ensure the delivery of their products or services. Last mile delivery processes and micro warehouses, online transaction for merchants, technological leverage in the logistic industry to collect and analyze data, to become the correct information and enhance efficiency. All this e-commerce platform needs digital connectivity. Question is, can the low Earth orbit, or LEO, satellite help achieve our vision of rural development through increased connectivity? For an archipelagic mountainous country like ours, LEO satellites appear promising. Broadband requires an extensive and expensive travel underground cable for remote areas, especially island, wherein satellite-based connectivity may be the only options, as they can connect people to the internet where traditional ground infrastructure is hard to reach. How fast and how affordable? This is something we may have to consider, and maybe the Beacon project, through forum such as this, can give us insights to what is possible. PCCI last year has successfully championed the signing of Executive Order EO number 127 to liberalize access to satellite technology. The EO allows direct access by internet service providers and value-added service providers with or without a congressional franchise to satellite technology. This is most welcome by the business sector, especially the MSMEs, which comprises 80% that are located outside the National Capital Region, and more than half that are in unserved and underserved area. We came up with a proof of concept to pilot test the use of internet via satellite in 5 select areas of the country. We already have proposals from ISPs and have gained the commitment of DICT to support the project. But there are still some snags that we have to work out. This includes questions on the speed, whether it will make it effective for MSMEs. One of our members in Visayas, through his experience, instead of using satellite, which he initially wanted to put up sometime in 2016 to connect rural enterprises and schools, finally switched to microwave technology, wherein he felt it was more efficient and more cost-effective. Of course, that was in 2016, and a lot has evolved since then. Perhaps Beacon may be able to partner with us as we pursue this satellite connectivity project, which holds much hope for our rural entrepreneurs and their development. Now, even as we are still promoting satellite connectivity for the unconnected areas, we are already undertaking several programs to help our MSMEs and our young people leverage on the promise of a digital economy. For one, last Wednesday, we launched a project with the Development Academy of the Philippines called SPARTA, or Smarter Philippines through Data Analytics Research and Development, Training and Adoption. We hope that this project will provide the skill and to the need for the enterprise and industry to mine large data to be able to strategically position our business after coming off from the pandemic. We also had training programs with Huawei on mobile apps development, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence. And to bring these applications to use, we have partnered with other USAID-funded projects, the Startup Village, to provide MSME mentorship in their digital transition, access to finance, and access to market. Let me end by sharing with you a story relayed by Jeffrey Histosis, one of our speakers in a webinar we held with Lazada on digital solutions, e-commerce, and the digital marketplace. Jeffrey, the founder of Ala e Barako, a wholesale and retail brand of Batangas Barako and chocolate tablea, narrated that he put his brand online while he still has his full-time job. However, once Ala e Barako started hitting six figures, he took the risk and resigned from his job and has been working from home ever since. This is just one of the many e-commerce success stories that we have heard and would like to replicate to our thousands of MSMEs still awaiting to be connected. Internet connectivity in the country is a must. We must work together and find ways to achieve this. First, because it is a basic requirement for the expansion of the development in the rural areas and the countryside. Second, because with the digital economy, we have been able to give more headroom to develop our economy, bringing us back on track to achieve the vision of Ambition 2040, where there is better quality of life and inclusivity for our fellow Filipinos. With that, I end my talk. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay tayo lahat.
Thank you. Maraming salamat din po, Mr. George Barcelon, President of the PCCI. Thank you for joining us this morning. And now, at this point, let's go back to Director Ellen Joyce Suficiencia from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Hello, ma'am. Good morning once again.
Hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, ma'am.
Okay, great. Apologies for that earlier. Let me assure you, it's not my connection here in the BSP. It was my audio laptop. So good morning again, and thank you, of course, to the organizers for giving the BSP this opportunity to share our insights on the critical role of satellite broadband in financial inclusion. So let me go straight to my first slide. So, of course, I will start by sharing some key ideas about financial inclusion. As many of you maybe already know, financial inclusion simply is a state in which everyone has access to a wide range of fit-for-purpose financial services in line with one's capabilities, needs, and context. Empirical evidence shows that financial inclusion can aid self-employment, improve household consumption, support greater local economic activity, and reduce inequality. Many Filipinos aspire to own a home, start a business, build a nest egg for comfortable retirement. Financial products such as credit, pension, and investment can help achieve these goals. The vision of the recently launched Financial Inclusion Strategy 2022 to 2028 emphasizes that the pursuit of financial inclusion is not for its own sake, but to help more Filipinos build financial resilience and participate in the country's inclusive economic growth story. Financial resilience means being able to cope with and recover from financial shocks in order to minimize impact on one's short-term consumption and long-term well-being. Products like savings and insurance, as well as social safety net programs, are crucial risk protection and risk building and resilience building tools for many Filipinos against disasters, health crisis, and other vulnerabilities. Lastly, financial services like digital payments support convenient and efficient online transactions, which clearly became a necessity during the pandemic. These are just some of the practical reasons for empowering all Filipinos with access to financial services. And this is why financial inclusion matters. In my next slide, I show here that financial inclusion remains a challenge in the Philippines. Based on our 2019 survey, barely 1/3 of Filipino adults own a formal financial account, which is a basic indicator of inclusion. Account ownership, especially among our rural population, is higher than urban population. This is a reversal from 2 years ago. But looking at account ownership per account type, we see that the main driver of rural account ownership is the microfinance NGO, given its strong presence in the rural areas and their high-touch client engagement approach. But among urban population, banks are the top driver of account ownership. We also look at physical access points, which remain crucial even as we deliberately transition to digital financial services. Physical touch points like bank branches, cash agents, and ATMs allow the consumers to conveniently move their cash to digital and vice versa. It may sound counterintuitive, but accessibility of these cash in and cash out points help build user confidence in banking and in going digital. And as you can see in this slide also, 15% of municipalities have no cash agents or bank branches, and 32% of our municipalities have no ATMs. There's also a significant disparity in terms of access point penetration per 100 square kilometers in various regions in the country. And unsurprisingly, NCR has the highest concentration of banks and ATMs per square meter. Calabarzon, which has the second highest concentration, represents just a small fraction of NCRs. And in terms of digital finance usage, mobile phone and account ownership are still underutilized for digital financial transactions. Only 1 out of 10 mobile phone owners use digital financial services. And utility of accounts for payment transactions is also low, especially in rural areas, while 47% of urban account holders use their account for payments. Only 35% of rural account holders use their account for payment. And the top 3 reasons for not using digital financial services are lack of awareness, lack of trust, and weak signal or slow internet connection. And in case you're wondering about a more updated data, the 2021 Financial Inclusion Survey, where we source all these data, is ongoing, and the results are due for release by middle of this year. In my next slide, please, you will see that many of the challenges in financial inclusion are addressable by digital technologies, which we know are already increasingly becoming cheaper and more accessible. For financial service providers, digital technology allows them to expand presence in countryside with cost-efficient solutions such as agent banking. They are able to improve their operational efficiencies and innovation capabilities with cloud-based digital solutions and industry payment infrastructure. Artificial intelligence and APIs can also enable them to deliver hyper-tailored financial services at much better prices due to efficiency gains and improved customer profiling. What all this means is financial service providers can viably serve the previously unbankable, even the base of the pyramid market. For consumers, this will allow them to do more convenient and cost-efficient banking with their phones, and they can readily transact with ubiquitous access points, especially for cashing in and cashing out. And lastly, they will have wider competitive options for digital financial services that best suit their needs. Digital technology is indeed a key enabler for financial inclusion, but financial service providers and consumers both need reliable and affordable internet connection to take full advantage of these digital solutions. Unfortunately, many parts of the country have limited or lack internet connection, and geography and type of locality play a role here. Based on our 2019 Financial Inclusion Survey, internet access in Mindanao stood at 30%, which is significantly lower than in Luzon at 60% and Visayas at 40%. Rural population are also quite disadvantaged with internet penetration at just 40% compared to the urban's 60%. Communities and households that have no internet access will be unable to take full advantage of the economic and social benefits of digital innovations. They are not just unconnected, they are also likely financially underserved and unbanked. So addressing the connectivity divide goes hand in hand with our inclusion efforts. A growing digital divide could exacerbate inequality and create new forms of exclusion in an already increasingly digital economy. Our incumbent telcos have traditionally found no commercial justification to build infrastructure to connect remote, inhospitable, and low population density areas. But satellite can represent an instant, ready-to-deploy infrastructure for these types of areas, regardless of distance, terrain, and human density. And for an archipelagic country like ours that is prone to natural disasters and security issues in some parts, satellite broadband can provide unmatched reliability for connectivity, especially post-disasters. So to promote satellite broadband connectivity, the BSP, the Financial Inclusion Steering Committee, and the PIC, the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, endorsed in 2020 a policy proposal to liberalize satellite access. This policy proposal eventually became Executive Order 127 signed by President Duterte in March 2021. It represented a policy shift from EO number 467 issued in 1998, which restricted satellite access only to enfranchised telecom entities. So before EO 127, in order to deliver satellite provision broadband services, internet service providers needed to go through an enfranchised telco, even if the telco does not have satellite facilities. This increases the cost of providing satellite broadband services by non-telco providers to clients, especially the rural households and businesses serving rural communities, such as our microfinance institutions. The required intermediation by an enfranchised telco likewise limits the flexibility and incentives of new players to invest in satellite network capacity and broaden internet service offerings, especially in areas unserved by the telcos. So the EO 127 essentially aims to enhance market competition and attract investments in the satellite broadband market. Ultimately, what we want to see is more affordable and widely available broadband services benefiting more Filipinos, especially in the underserved communities. And based on 2021 rapid survey conducted by the BSP, only 1% of financial service providers use satellite broadband, but 80% of our respondents say that they would use it if made widely available. The financial services sector can be a prime market and could drive the demand for satellite broadband given their digitalization thrust and financial inclusion directives. And with a dynamic and growing satellite broadband market, we can connect more communities, we can bank better, and bank more Filipinos. For one, we can reduce the gaps in the coverage of our cash-in and cash-out network by enabling our banks and other institutions to operate cash agents and ATMs in previously underserved areas. And with wider and better internet connectivity, there will also be more potential users of mobile banking and digital financial services, or DFS. A growing user base for DFS is naturally a boon for our financial institutions looking to expand their market and create new revenue streams. DFS innovations can then also be adopted at a wider scale as connectivity barriers are removed. Lastly, satellite technology can be a valuable part of the business continuity toolkit of financial institutions to disaster-proof their internet connectivity. This will enable swift recovery in banking operations during disasters and ensure that they can continue to serve the financial transactions of the affected communities, particularly for receiving much-needed financial aid. These are just some of the concrete ways satellite broadband connectivity can support better and more inclusive financial services for Filipinos. Our efforts, of course, to promote connectivity for financial inclusion do not end with our policy advocacy for the EO on satellite access liberalization. We continue to support other policy reforms for better connectivity, including the Public Service Act and the Open Access in Data Transmission Bill. By removing barriers to entry, these reforms can bring greater competition in the satellite broadband market toward more affordable and reliable connectivity for all. And the previous panel also highlighted other remaining administrative and licensing process frictions that perhaps warrant urgent attention from our policymakers. And beyond these policies, we also need to actively seek and shape collaboration in both government and private sector to implement programs that can demonstrate the benefits of the policy reforms. BSP on its part is in active discussions with relevant agencies like the PhilSA to identify strategic support to connect rural areas for financial inclusion. Lastly, forums such as this organized by Beacon are important in drawing out actionable insights and moving the conversation on better connectivity forward. So we are therefore very grateful to have been invited to join this important conversation. With that, maraming salamat po.
Thank you also, Director Sufficiencia, for joining us in this webinar session. All right, at this point, let me turn over the program once again to John Garrity for the synthesis and the visual summary of the webinar. John?
Thank you, Trisha. Thank you, Director Sufficiencia, and also to George Barcelon for your comments and your presentations and your remarks. I just wanted to take a few minutes. We heard a lot of information today from our speakers, our presentations, our panelists, and we've been taking a lot of notes, and we're going to be putting it into formal documentation. But we also have a little bit of a visual summary. If the team could kindly share that on the screen. The visual summary, if possible. There we go. So as part of our note-taking, we also worked on a visual summary with our partners at Pushpin, and we heard a lot of information today. I mean, we heard from Director General Marciano about the importance of the space economy and how significant it is, and the opportunities for the Philippines, not only to benefit from broadband internet connectivity, but also to participate in adjacent activities within the space economy. We also heard from Acting Secretary Caintic about some of the existing challenges and issues in the Philippines. This point about the National ICT Household Survey showing that only 1 in 5 households in the Philippines have access, have internet access at home. And some of the actions that are being taken by the government, such as the Executive Order 127 to spur greater access to satellite broadband. We heard from ADB on the options and why satellite can play a role in certain situations. And we also heard about some of the sectoral issues and applications of broadband connectivity, such as for financial inclusion, as we heard from BSP and also from PCCI. So just to summarize a few last points that maybe we'd like to further discuss in future forums and work on, and the fact that we see satellite connectivity as a way to complement other technologies as we try and address the digital divide in the Philippines. Specifically looking at LEO satellite constellations, what LEO satellite constellations can do is really help to expand the availability of satellite broadband connectivity options. So there's satellite and then there's LEO. Also, the LEO broadband providers that we heard from today really differ on the basis of their go-to-market strategies, their technologies, their market segment focus, and the services that they offer. And so the viability of these different models it remains to be seen, and we're excited to see what they may be able to do here in the Philippines, addressing some of the technical viability concerns and then the service model differences that they raised. We also discussed the recent policy and regulatory developments in the Philippines that are helping to open up greater access to satellite broadband, such as EO 127 and the PSA amendment, but other lingering barriers remain. And we heard about some of these frictions that the BSP also mentioned. Further, with continued technological developments, market entry, and competition, LEOs can play a role in spurring improved consumer options for broadband in underserved areas, provided that the policy environment allow for entry. So lastly, just to close on my part, the impact of LEO on social and economic development remains to be seen. And on our next webinar, the second in this two-part series that we'll be hosting in May with our partners, we will go further into discussing the use cases and the application of LEO in advancing government and private sector initiatives in financial inclusion, in digital economy issues, e-commerce, governance, education, and health. So moving on, and to close our discussion today, I would like to introduce Thomas Abel from the Asian Development Bank. Thomas Abel is the chief of ADB's Digital Technology for Development Unit in the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. And his unit promotes the effective use of digital technology across ADB's programs to improve development impact. His team works with ADB member countries in supporting the transition to the digital economy and provides assistance across many areas, including e-government, connectivity, tech startup, ecosystems, Earth observation, technology policy, and industry partnerships. Thomas has over 30 years of professional experience in digital technology, including technology policy and strategy, software development, and systems architecture, and has worked extensively across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, including on various issues on internet connectivity. So Thomas, over to you for closing remarks.
Thanks, John. I would have shortened that intro if I had known we were over. But yes, thanks for inviting us, and thanks for all the speakers for the great work, and especially the audience for everyone showing up. It's a great turnout, and we're really happy to see the enthusiasm for this topic. ADB is very interested in supporting bridging the digital divide. We find more and more of our investments and our programs and our development activities are dependent on people getting connected. And the pandemic, as everybody knows, has made that even more urgent. And we really have to find ways to solve this. As the speakers have said, the current model is not reaching enough people fast enough. We have to speed it up. So we have to look for technology, policy, support, advocacy, everything we can do. We're doing a lot. Our team in ADB is very happy to work on this, and we're especially happy to work, in this event, with the Philippine Space Agency and USAID Beacon program. The Philippines is our host country, and everyone in ADB is especially interested in supporting development in the Philippines. And this is probably one of the most important areas. We're also looking forward to working with the hosts on the future engagements. John already mentioned the next webinar in this series, which will go into more detail, and we're happy to participate in that as well. So with that, I just want to thank again everybody for joining, and I'll hand it back to the Master of Ceremony for closing out the session. And thanks for staying along as well. Thanks, Tricia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas Abel, Chief of the Digital Technology for Development of the Asian Development Bank. So at this point, we would like to thank all our participants who took the time and spent their morning with us in joining this webinar. It's been very insightful, informative, engaging, and we will have part 2 of this webinar in May. So watch out for that. We'll see you again very soon. But before you exit this virtual meeting room, please don't forget to accomplish the post-event survey form. We will be flashing the link of that on your screens. There you go. And we will also drop the link on the chat box. So remember to accomplish this form before you exit the virtual meeting room. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you also to our resource speakers for taking the time for joining this conversation. Thank you very much also to USAID's Beacon activity and ADB. They're our partners who made this event possible. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again very soon for the part 2 of this webinar that will happen in May. So tune in to announcements after this webinar. Thank you so much. Good morning. Have a great day.